Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Taylor, and today I'm going to be talking about pages 131 through 137 of Chapter 6, which focuses on group climate and cohesiveness. So, the main points I'm going to go over are defensive and supportive climates, interpersonal conformation and disconformation, and group cohesiveness. And I put a few key terms in blue, so just keep an eye out for those. So, defensive and supportive climates. A group climate is the feeling or atmosphere created through different group interactions, and this can be how people communicate, what they're communicating about, how often they're talking, and all of these lead to different levels of satisfaction. So the key to a supportive group climate is not only what we communicate, but how we communicate. So we're going to go over a few different supportive and defensive different types of communication. I put support in green and defensive in red. So evaluation versus description. Evaluation is a lot of you language and attacking the speaker and their ideas and saying that they are no good, whereas description is describing your feelings on the person or the idea, your thoughts on how it fits into what you're already talking about. Control versus problem orientation. Control is the I know what's best for you sort of mindset, and it's a very persuasive tactic used by a lot of salespeople who basically ask you questions that end up persuading you into buying whatever they're selling. Whereas problem orientation is aimed always at the end solution. So it's about solving the problem no matter what that means, as long as it benefits the whole group, and making sure that everyone is always on the same page. Strategy versus spontaneity. So strategy is a planned out conversation, and it can feel really manipulative to group members because they feel like you're forcing them to feel the way you want them to feel. Whereas spontaneity is just being in the here and now and honest responses and letting the conversation flow, and everyone's a part of the brainstorming and clarifying on ideas rather than shutting people down and trying to get them to think the way you want them to think. So neutrality versus empathy. Neutrality is not responding at all or acting really detached from the group. And it basically tells the group that you don't care about this process and the outcome doesn't affect you. And that can be really negative. Whereas empathy is involvement and showing that you're concerned about the group tasks and the group members. And for both of them, neutrality, the nonverbal is going to be really negative. It could be closed off, like crossing your arms, that sort of thing. Whereas empathetic body language is going to be open and participatory and all that sort of good body language. So superiority versus equality. In a group, you don't want to act like you're better than someone, because even if you feel it, you shouldn't show it. Your opinions should be equal, and that's why equality makes for a better group. Equal participation, and it's based on mutual respect and making sure everyone is on the same page. Certainty versus provisionalism. So certainty is the idea that what you say is always right, and you don't care about others' opinions, and no matter what facts are put in, you're going to stick with your opinion. It's a hard opinion. Whereas provisionalism is a lot more flexible, and you want to hear other people's inputs, and you're willing to change your mindset for the betterment of the group as a whole. And it's about solving the problem, whereas certainty is about winning the argument. So now we're going to talk about interpersonal confirmation and disconfirmation. So a lot of times group members complain that their group feels disjointed or disconnected, and this creates uneasiness. But a lot of this disconnectedness comes from poor communication. And there are different ways you can respond to your group members. So confirming responses are responses that make people value themselves more and make them feel that their input is important. Whereas disconfirming responses are responses that make people value themselves less and kind of halt the conversation and make people feel like they shouldn't even put in their input. So there are about 7 disconfirming responses. An impervious response is not even acknowledging that someone had said something before you. Interrupting response, irrelevant response, a tangential response is the most detrimental because you're basically acknowledging that something was said, but you're choosing to ignore it and talk about something else instead anyways, which can be really bad for that person who spoke. They're not going to want to put in any more input. Impersonal responses, which is a lot of one must and talking to the group as if you're disconnected from it. Incoherent responses, incongruous responses, which means your nonverbal behavior doesn't match up with what you're saying. So you could be yelling and saying, I'm not mad, who's mad? But you look pissed off. The confirming responses basically all measure up to the idea of yes and. You're confirming what someone has said and you're adding on in a positive way, and this leads to the group having a better task outcome. It is showing that everyone's voice is important in the group, all of these responses. So those are the different kind of responses. So now we're going to talk about group cohesiveness, which is one of the most important group variables. And group cohesiveness, the definition is the degree of attraction members feel toward one another and toward the group. And a more cohesive group obviously leads to better productivity. So composition and cohesiveness, making up your group. It's good to find a balance of similarities and complementary qualities. A group solely based on similarity, yes, will have great relational outcomes, but when it comes to solving a task, they're going to be pretty mediocre, because the benefit of diversity is that you have people bringing in ideas from a bunch of different aspects. There's also a lot of weakness in self-chosen groups, because when we choose groups ourselves, we tend to choose people that we get along with, and that doesn't necessarily bring into account people that are going to bring different skills to the table that the group really needs. There's also weakness in wanting superior group members. It's good to want people you think are amazing, but that can also shut down other people's ideas. Someone who is superior in the group is going to have the loudest voice, and that can kind of hurt other people's opinions. Diversity is good and bad. It's good to find a balance. You want people to bring different ideas to the table, but sometimes there can be miscommunications. So as long as you find ways to minimize those misunderstandings, the group can be really strong. Individual benefits and cohesiveness. So when people are in a group, they want to feel that their needs are being met, and most people have the need to feel affiliated. They want power, affection, and prestige. So when these goals are met, people feel that their group is more cohesive. And what they're doing is comparing it to other groups. So is this group meeting my needs more than this group? And that's how they're going to decide how cohesive the group feels to them. Think of your family or your close friends. Those feels like the strongest groups to you because a lot of your personal needs are being met. Task effectiveness and cohesiveness, it's pretty self-explanatory. Success fosters cohesiveness. So if everyone's concerned for the task and there's a positive outcome, you're going to think your group did well. Communication and cohesiveness. So communication is the main key for everything. Communication is what makes groups function. And as long as communication is strong and agreeable and there's a lot of it, and you're able to establish goals and negotiate roles and show similarities and differences and express affection, your group is going to be a strong group and have a really positive outcome. So cohesiveness in virtual teams is probably the most difficult, because right off the bat there's a lack of initial trust and cohesiveness and satisfaction, because you're not face to face, and you're missing a lot of the nonverbal cues. It's difficult to give process feedback, which is, commenting on comments that are being made or how productivity is going. It's hard. You have to stay really on top of that in virtual teams, and you have to constantly be responding to people online, which can be hard for people to do. So the best way to have group cohesiveness in virtual teams is for regular process feedback and contact, because people will feel like the group is positive and that they're being encouraged, and it keeps people motivated and it builds trust. So that is the PowerPoint on Chapter 6, pages 131 through 137, and I hope you learned something.